What's up everyone, Soldier First Class here, and today's mission, we're here to discuss a Final Fantasy XIV theory. This theory will include Fandaniel, the second coming of the final days, and the Cult of Kefka as it pertains to Fandaniel. Now, you're probably wondering what I'm talking about when I say the Cult of Kefka, but all your questions and more will be answered as we dive into this theory. Keep in mind there will be major spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, the subsequent patches, and Final Fantasy VI. To get started, I want to talk about the similarities between Fandaniel and Kefka Palazzo from Final Fantasy VI. Fandaniel is very flamboyant in nature, choosing erratic, dance-like movements, and Asahi's demented higher-pitched voice.
Imagine it! Bound no more by the shackles of mouldering memories of damnable duty, free at last to live for the moment!
Sounds like a certain clown god of destruction, doesn't it? But that's not all, as Fandaniel seems to be able to control primals, or as they're called in Final Fantasy VI, espers. I believe they're mixing in some Final Fantasy IX lore here as well, because the use of the primals seems more in line with what Kuja was doing than Kefka. This combined with Fandaniel's servant being Bahamut, and I think they're mixing the two villains into Fandaniel. In the patch 5.5 trailer we got at the most recent producer live letter, lunar versions of several primals are seen, including Ravana, Ifrit, and Odin. One of Kefka's main goals was to absorb all of the espers, which he eventually succeeded in. While it doesn't appear that Fandaniel is absorbing them, he is using the power of the primals to make himself more powerful. It's pretty obvious that Fandaniel's goal by the end of the next patch, or at least before Endwalker begins, is to leave the world in ruin. Until now, we've avoided the 8th Umbral Calamity, saving the first from Emet, Selch, and Elidibus. But with both of the Unsundered out of the way, there's no one to contain Fandaniel's lust for destruction. Fandaniel himself says he only wishes to destroy anything and everything, including himself. Again, sound familiar, does it? Now here's where the Cult of Kefka comes in. For those that have played Final Fantasy VI, Kefka succeeds in becoming a god and destroys the world. The second half of the game takes place in the world of ruin, and the party must reunite to climb Kefka's tower and finally put an end to his reign of terror. During the party's journey to reunite and stop Kefka, they encounter a cult of people who have sold their souls and heart to Kefka due to the fear of the god of magic. They blindly worship him and even protect his most regarded treasures, including the soul of Thamasa. These people have lost all control of themselves and just shuffle about while worshipping him. Kinda sounds like how tempering works in Final Fantasy XIV. This brings us to what I believe will happen in Final Fantasy XIV's next patch, or even in Endwalker, the return of the Lambs of Dalamid. This was a cult of those that worshipped the lesser moon Dalamid, even going to lengths of sacrificial offerings and murder. Now, we have to dive into the Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 2 for this next part, but stick with me because this gets real interesting. In the Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 2, on page 25, there's an entry that talks about the Lambs of Dalamid. It states, despite numbering in what religious scholars estimate to be the thousands, the Lambs of Dalamid all but disappeared from the public eye immediately following the fall of the Lesser Moon. Scattered reports from across Eorzea suggest there may still be factions that continue the blood rites, however their numbers are insignificant. Whither then did all the lambs go? It is quite possible that the beliefs of those cultists who survived the calamity were dismantled by the revelation Dalamid was not but an iron prison for the ethereal manifestation of a long-dead worm. God damn it, Koji. Having lost faith, they simply abandoned the cult and returned to their old lives. Word from the Far East, though, may suggest otherwise. Adventurers and traders have brought back with them tales of intrigue, a swelling of the ranks of these scattered tribes who pledged spiritual allegiance to the Dusk Mother Nama, and the abductions have followed. Is it merely coincidence, or could this prove the beginnings of something sinister? Only time will tell. Take special note of the word from the Far East part. This shows that they did in fact make their way towards the east where Xenos had once had his base of operations. It's not crazy to think that Fandaniel knew about the lambs, tempered them, and then will use them to start the second coming of the final days. Fandaniel will need an army, and it's clear that tempering and the curing of tempering are becoming huge factors in the fight against Xenos and Fandaniel. And much like Kefka, I can see Fandaniel attaining the goal of a world of ruin and laying waste to the source. Let's also take a look at what the Lambs of Dalamid could be doing, as they resorted to kidnapping and other nefarious tricks to gain sacrifices. We know that Beast Tribe members have been getting kidnapped from patch 5.4, but for what purpose? If we take a look at this screenshot from the 5.5 trailer, we can see Fordola fighting Lunar Ifrit. But what's interesting to note is that in the back, we see a fleshy looking structure and what appears to be an Amaurot trapped within. Ifrit is the primal associated with the Amaurot. We also need to take a look at concept art from the Endwalker reveal showcase that shows us a look at a new dungeon dungeon or at least a new area. In this dungeon, we see the same Maki architecture we saw in the Void Ark raid series. However, it appears as if it's got power cables running throughout the area. You'll also notice the same fleshy structures lining this entire room, but there's something different inside of them. It appears to be yet another beast tribe, the Thavnarian Matanga. These elephant-like creatures are stuck inside these prisons much like the Amalja were in the 5.5 trailer. And if you look at the tower in the middle here, we can see what appears to be the Magus Sisters. They were introduced in Final Fantasy IV, which is what Endwalker appears to have heavy references to. If this part of my theory is correct, then the Magus Sisters are the Matanga's associated primals, and we'll end up facing them at some point. This would explain why we're fighting different lunar versions of the primals, because the Lambs of Dalamid are kidnapping the beast tribes, and Fandaniel is forcing them to summon their primals using these cages. Now, if this is all true and not just rumors and wives' tales, we have a Cult of Kefka type situation going on here. And to further this evidence, look no further than the Endwalker trailer. As Fandaniel looks upon an altar of flames, take a look at what he's wearing, a red robe. What do the Lambs of Dalamid wear? Red robes. Now, I could just be diving down the rabbit hole a little bit too much, but all of this is connecting in a way that leaves me blown away by the possibilities of what's to come in 5.5 and Endwalker. I want to dive into the World of Ruin as a concept as well, because there's something that needs to be pointed out about the similarities with it and what's happening in the Endwalker trailer. If we look at the description of the World of Ruin, it states, "At the center of the former Imperial continent, Kefka's tower, a monument to destruction, was formed with the debris. Atop this monument, Kefka uses his light of judgment to exert his will on the world and destroy those who disobey him. Many monsters of legend were released when the world shifted, including Humbaba, Deathgaze, and the 8 legendary dragons. Many of the weaker monsters also mutated into stronger, more violent beasts." The first line describes exactly what's going on with Garlemald and the tower we see on the map in the trailer. The tower appears in the middle of Garlemald and is where Xenos and Fandaniel have set up their base of operations. The final 2 lines, however, are the 2 lines I want to focus on because of their importance to the lore of 14's Amaurot, the home of the Ascians. When the final days occurred, there was a massive release of terrible creatures upon the Ascian homeland, known as the Sound Beast, or what we'll call the Terminus Beasts. These are present in the Amaurot dungeons and are the production of what was coined as a cacophonous keening. Cacophonous means a harsh, discordant mixture of sounds, and keening means the action of wailing in grief for the dead, or it can mean a prolonged and high-pitched sound, typically in a way that expresses grief or sorrow. These were creatures that had once been creations of the Ascians, but were transformed into terrifying monstrosities with much more power than ever before. These creatures took on the visage of the Ascians' deepest fears and were due to the Ascians losing control of their creation magics after this keening. In the Endwalker trailer, the main character and the twins are seen fighting the exact same Terminus Beast that we fight in the Amaurot dungeon. These appear to be something that Fandaniel has summoned to the source and used as a way to aid in the world's destruction. If the World of Ruin occurs like I think it will, and we really have a Final Days 2.0, then the Terminus Beast returning makes even more sense. This also makes me believe that we're finally going to be finding out what caused this cacophonous keening in Endwalker. And if my theory is correct, Fandaniel could be looking for a way to replicate it or even trigger it. And if he does, that would explain the Terminus Beast appearing again, but this time in the source. I want to drop another bombshell on you guys, and that's the floating continent and how it could come into play. If we look at the map of Eorzea, and specifically Garlemald, we can see a floating island above the Empire. In this image here, there's also 3 Imperial ships flying around Garlemald, with a floating island above the Empire. Sound familiar? Well, in Final Fantasy VI, the floating continent was the location of the Warring Triad, the statues whose power Kefka used to become a god. It's where the party encountered Kefka, witnessed him becoming a god, and the beginning of the World of Ruin was put into motion. When we look at the map of Eorzea in the Endwalker reveal trailer, the ships are gone, Garlemald has a massive new tower that appears to have either crash-landed or rose from the ground, and the floating continent is still there. This could be a location we end up going to during Endwalker, and could be the site of the final confrontation with Fandaniel. Overall, I'm seeing a lot of heavy references to Final Fantasy VI, and if my theories are correct, then we're going to get a lot of action packed into the next few story patches. My guess is that we'll see the return of the Lambs of Dalamid, the start of the Final Days 2.0, and the destruction that Fandaniel and Xenos have planned for the Warrior of Light. All I know is if I hear the first few notes of Dark World, I'm gonna lose my mind. Thanks for watching, everyone, and don't forget to omni-slash that like button. Let me know in the comments section below what you thought of this theory, and give me some ideas of your own. Subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to join the ranks of Soldier today. And for all the latest Final Fantasy XIV news, rumors, theories, and trailers, I'm Soldier First Class, and I'm on to the next mission. Later, guys.